This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to...
This is Nos Arietes.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
Save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rangers through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Lodeiro leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is good.
Seattle Sounders, the greatest MLS team in history.
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
And Paul McKay says, cheat!
We want to win. Let's see how the Sunday, bro.
Good for Seattle!
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes, sponsored by Full Pull Wines, Watson's Counter, and our Substack subscribers. This is the question and answer episode for Week 19 of the MLS season. I'm Jeremiah Shan, and joining me today is Aaron Campo and our engineer Lickett. Well, Aaron, let's just jump right in. What do we got from our Substack subscribers?
Great question, Jeremiah. Our first question comes from Fred Breedlove. I know Danny Leyva has been getting some starts in Denver, but have you seen or heard any reports about how he's actually doing? Thanks all. Love what you do. Thank you, Fred. We love what you do.
Yeah. So yeah, he has gotten a fair number of starts. I believe he has 4 starts in MLS play. He's got another one in the Open Cup, and he's got 8 or 9 appearances across all competitions. He's been, frankly, what you'd probably expect. He's looked good at times. He has not necessarily looked great all the time, but his I was looking at his numbers, and they are basically the same numbers he was putting up with the Sounders, just in more minutes, which I think is probably what the Sounders hoped would happen here. Is that and I don't know how much more attractive that makes him or less attractive that makes him on the transfer. Or probably makes him more attractive, I would think, than if anything. But it also has coincided with Colorado in a really bad run of form. I don't think they have a win at home yet.
That's insane. We talked about this on the main show about the underperformance, overperformance relative, and Colorado has also really underperformed expectations, based on expected goals, but they're still pretty stinky. I think it's fair to say. Yeah.
This is another one from our Substack subscribers, as from Bill Jones. What are the chances that the Sounders play a completely rotated lineup for the Leagues Cup? I'm really hoping they do.
It's tough because there are definitely players that I'd like to see get some rest and really come back for the post-League Cup run in top form. But if they don't, the Leagues Cup could potentially last for 6 weeks or something like that.
Almost, yeah. It's like over a month. It's like July 15th to August 20th, I think.
Yeah, and so you don't want to break that significant. I think it's fair to say you want players playing. You want players playing. Being sharp. You probably want to. I think you should try to win the competition if you're going to be in it. And I think the thing that really takes a toll is playing in concurrent competitions. I think if you're taking a break from MLS and playing in one competition at a time, you're probably not going to run anybody too ragged. But I do think there's something to be said for Nico not necessarily playing in every game. Raul not necessarily playing in every game. Maybe getting Javier Arriaga some starts, etc. and so forth. So I would like to see some rotation, but I don't think I would go so far as to say I want to see a completely rotated lineup, and I don't think the Sounders are ever going to do that either.
No, and it's like you said, it's a tough position to try to rotate too heavily because, I think the worst case scenario is probably that you go out in the group stage and you end up with too much time off. Like I don't know that, like, if the Sounders go out after 2 games and they're sitting around for 3 or 4 weeks, I don't think that's good. So I think the best case scenario is probably, advancing at least into the first or second knockout round game. The worst case scenario is probably is getting eliminated from the group stage or going out like in the semifinals because you miss out on getting the CONCACAF spot as well as playing a bunch of extra games, which kind of worst of both worlds in that situation.
Yeah, for sure.
I suppose the absolute worst case scenario would be losing. I think there's a 3rd place game, and losing the 3rd place game would be absolutely brutal.
Why would you do that?
Well, because there's 3 spots for Champions Cup.
Yeah, I guess.
So I think that's why they're playing. I would assume they're playing a 3rd place game.
Yeah, that sucks. I hate this thing so much. It hasn't even started. All right, on to the Twitter questions. This first one is from @23squared. Nico has 1 goal from the spot. Otherwise, I can't think of a single shot that was even remotely on target this year. It's not his main job, but has he forgotten how to soccer? How goal dangerous does he look in practice?
I do wonder if he meant to say, did he forget how to score? But I appreciate
I would say
that
soccer is his main job.
But I do think it's funny that he wrote that. But so I looked this up, and he only has 1 goal this season, like he said. And over the course of the season, his shots on goal are not actually. He has, I think, 7 other shots on goal other than the penalty. But in his last 7 games, he doesn't have any outside of the penalty. And it does seem like he's become considerably less goal dangerous, at least in recent memory. I don't know if he was carrying a knock. I don't know if he was tired. I don't know what it was, but he had a couple really notable misses recently where he kind of got cut back passes near the penalty spot that he just absolutely skied. So, Nico still looks decent in practice. I will say, as a sort of a side note, probably the most clinical finisher in practice is Albert. Which I don't know, maybe will surprise people, but that guy seems like he finishes everything in practice. So it does seem weird that he's struggled so much in front of goal recently.
It does, but finishing is one of those things, man. I'm definitely not on the finishing isn't a skill train, but it's maybe less of one than people think.
Yeah, I mean, I think not to get too down this road, but too far down in this road. But I think the thing is, the theory is that once you become an elite, an elite forward, the thing that separates a Raul Ruidiaz from an Albert is just not that big over a large sample size. For instance,
it's true.
But anyway, this one is from Josh on the Sound. Hard talk time. Is a certain left back's inability to threaten up the line with a reliable progressive pass holding the team back on offense? Numbers have other left back options as more useful offensive partners for Chu. He notes that 5 of Chu's 6 assists happened while Nouhou wasn't on the field.
I mean, on the one hand, I guess it's hard to argue with that last number, but I'm still going to. I think that it was pretty bad against Charlotte. The left side of the field was really, really isolated.
Yes.
There was just no attention paid to anyone but Leo Chu, and that made it fairly difficult for him. And that was sort of the playbook last year, is you just let Nouhou do whatever he wants because he's not going to hurt you. And that was generally pretty true. But it hasn't been the case all year, even when Nouhou was playing. Earlier in the season, he was playing left back. Sounders were scoring like crazy. The Sounders were creating trouble on the left part of the left side of the field. And I think a lot of that has to do with something that you brought up in the main episode this week of a lot of what Nico does is he rotates over to the left flank so that he's doing a lot of the ball progression that a left back would normally do, because the Sounders sort of tilt the field a little bit towards the right. And he plays as more of a center back in possession. He's not able to do that when Nico isn't there. And so I think that's why it really stood out. And I think stands out as well when Nico is just not playing very well, which he hasn't been for a couple months. So maybe I'm talking myself into the answer to this question being yes. But we do have a proof of concept that this team can function with him playing as a stay-at-home left back. They just need to get back to doing that so that his inability to really contribute a lot to the attack is not holding them back.
Yeah, and I suppose the argument is Cody Baker at times has looked capable of sort of mixing the defense first attitude of a left back that sort of drops into that center back position while still being able to play that progressive ball that Nouhou does not play as well. I'm just not quite ready to, like, Nouhou is still an elite defender, and I think we have not seen him at his best the last couple games. I mean, this is a guy who just is still coming back from malaria. So I'm inclined to see him a little bit more. I'm going to be really curious to see how he looks coming out of this current break, because I think we'll see him a little closer to his full strength. And, I think he can play the pass and advance the ball a little bit better than, we've seen recently as well. So
this next one is from Chris Cho. How can the Sounders improve on set pieces / corners? It seems like Nico's service has been poor for a while now, rarely getting past the first defender, and eventually Rusnak or JP take over. The short corners also look poorly constructed.
Yeah, so I this is another one that I had looked into it at some point, and Nico is not carrying as much of the burden on set pieces as he has in years past, but he's still taking like 2/3 of the Sounders corners. And that it seems almost inescapable at this point that they got to try something else. The Sounders haven't scored directly off a corner all year. I think they're credited, I believe, with 3 set piece goals. One of them would be Jackson Reagan's assist this last week. They had another that was sort of like off a recycled set piece or a recycled free kick, I believe, or early in the season, and then they had one off a throw-in. So these are not like directly off corner, the kind of service that you're expecting. So yeah, I mean, I think that is an area that they need to improve on, and if that means JP and Rusnak are taking more of the corners, it might be time for that.
Yeah, I've definitely defended Nico's set piece service in the past, especially from corners. He's been a lot better in the past, and
exactly
it's tough because one of the complaints here is that he rarely gets past the first defender, and that's always been one of the complaints. The difference is that in the past, the times he did get past the first defender, it was extremely dangerous. Now it's not. He's just not putting the balls into good areas. Corners are low percentage by their nature, but the highest percentage place to put a corner, if you're going to not take a short corner, is where he used to put the ball most of the time. And it looks bad a lot of the time, but when it doesn't, it's usually a goal or at least a dangerous chance. Is not doing that anymore. So I'm totally with you. I also agree that I just think that the Sounders set piece design is pretty... I don't love it. They just don't seem to really have any creative set piece routines. I don't know. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but I never feel like if they are going to get a goal off a set piece, it's either going to be because they catch the opposition napping or because somebody just outcompetes somebody for a ball. I just haven't felt like they were truly dangerous from set pieces in a while. And I think part of that is they just don't do a lot with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And they get plenty. It seems like they get a lot of free kicks and corners that should be dangerous. If not necessarily, you're not going to score a ton of goals necessarily that way, but you can score more than the Sounders are scoring. That's for sure. And I'll add, it was only 2 years ago that the Sounders were tied for the league lead in set piece goals. So it's not like, and it's a lot of the same players, but they just are not, they're not performing in that area. This is from GBent14. What position will the Sounders look for during the summer transfer window? Surely they plan to make some signings, right? Right?
I mean,
all caps.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, they probably I think almost certainly can't make a big signing.
Yeah.
I don't think they can even make a TAM signing as I understand their cap situation.
I don't think they can, at least not without moving anyone.
Right. And I just don't see, maybe Arriaga gets moved and that opens up some space. But the problem the Sounders have is that their best players that are underperforming, they can't really do anything about. And the rest of their best players have been hurt. And they can't really do anything about that. I mean, they kind of have to stick with it. And we've got a question that gets into more of this stuff coming up, so I won't go too far down this line. But I mean, their roster is what it is for a little bit. And that's just kind of the situation they're in. I mean, the Sounders made a bet on winning the Champions League, and they won the Champions League.
And I think
this is kind of where they're at.
And they also made a bet that that these players had, another year or two left in them, and that may prove true. Like I think there is a world where the Sounders end up winning the Western Conference and go on a playoff run. I don't think that's so crazy to think. So it's like I don't want to make it sound like this was obviously that we already know this was a bad gamble. But honestly, the biggest additions the Sounders are probably going to make this summer are Jordan Morris coming back, Christian Roldan coming back, Raul Ruidiaz hopefully staying healthy, and frankly, if you add those three players to this team, those are pretty significant additions, I think. And unless they move a big contract one way or the other, I don't think they're bringing in a big signing. And the way this all feels like it's setting up for me is that this next off season is probably going to be a big one for the Sounders. And maybe we should just jump right into that question. This is from, how do we pronounce his name, by the way?
Soundernavia.
Soundernavia,
like Scandinavia. But
okay.
Sounders.
Okay, that makes sense. Now that you point that out, so the Sounders have a number of high-profile contracts expiring at the end of the season. Would you rather the Sounders do 2 full DPs with 3 U22 initiative players to go along with that, or go with 3 full DPs and 1 U22, which is the current setup? The Sounders' record on DP is significantly better than their U22 record, although, of course, they've only made 1 U22 signing. But I don't know, what would you rather see them do? Would you rather see them spread it around and go with more sort of like high potential, or play it safe and
I think that the level of U22 players that MLS teams can sign, I think Leo Chu is a great example of the kind of contributions you can expect. He has really turned into a hell of a player, and it took a couple years. And if you are putting all of your resources into 3 of those guys, maybe you hit on all 3 of them, and you've got a senior DP that is going to, tie everything together, and you get the best of both worlds. I don't think the odds of that are great. I think there is a reality in which which MLS teams are getting a caliber of prospect that they're not getting now. That is a much more of a sure thing. That's in that age bracket where you could go to that strategy, but I don't think they're there yet. So I'm definitely more on the side of the 3 full DPs and 1 sort of lottery ticket U22 player. I think that there's a way to make the other way work, and I don't know who the Sounders are looking at. I don't know any of that, right? And I think if you have the right TAM guys and you're really sure about the U22 players, you can make that one work. But I think that the Sounders they're not a team that thrives on their risk taking, right? They make really good, safe decisions. Generally, they opt for the sure thing, and it's served them pretty well. And I just don't see them abandoning that path.
I think your logic is sound there. I think one of the big variable in all this is my assumption is Nico, whether or not Nico is back, his DP spot is the one that is most likely to open up. And that sort of like opens that's what allows you to make this decision next year. and they could, if they could potentially just say like, look, we need Nico's replacement. We're going to spend $10 million on finding Nico's replacement. And that's essentially, that's the move we're going to make this offseason, because if you do that, you already have Leo. I think Leo Chu is already locked in at the U22 spot. You would probably have Rusnak and Rui Diaz as your other two DPs. There's another world where they decide that Rusnak can be Nico's replacement, even if it's, not the forever replacement, but they feel like that's a viable way to go into next season. And if that's what they see, I think that at least opens up the possibility that they could be a little bit more creative with how they use these other spots, because then you can sign either a young DP, or you can sign a veteran that you can turn into a TAM next year. And or you maybe you don't sign a veteran, maybe you just move Jordan Morris into that sort of like buy downable non-full DP contract spot, and then you go out and find 3 young guys that you really like, or 2 young guys that you really like, and so I guess the difference may end up only being 1 extra signing for all those machinations, but I mean, I think that's sort of what it hinges on, is whether or not they think Albert Rusnak is a suitable number 10 next year.
Right. And it's also possible that Nico comes back and the expectation is he's going to be the 10, but he's in a situation where he knows he's going to have to compete and maybe take a lesser role, and certainly not going to be a DP. So they do have options that maybe are not blowing everything up, or that are definitely not blowing everything up and going with a completely different route. But I think fundamentally, that they're more likely to go the safer route. And even, like you said, I think it's entirely plausible that they go into next season with an open DP spot, or the ability to open a DP spot.
Right. I think there's a pretty good chance Jordan ends up occupying that DP spot, either if it's temporary. I believe he'll still be below the max DP threshold next year. But I guess you can go.
All right. So the next one is from Daniel Paveto. What kind of incense/sage should be burned in the locker room to get over the slump? 10 games where we can't score, and now we can score but can't defend.
I mean, right. I'm hopeful that that's not the case. Like, I hope that the defense thing was a 1-game blip and the offense is here to stay. And I think we're going to, the nice thing about this LAFC game is I think it's going to really tell us where we stand pretty clearly. Like, I think it's entirely possible the Sounders come out and look borderline dominant against LAFC, especially given their workload. But if they don't, maybe we do need to bring out the incense and the sage. And although I'm not sure, where do you put that if you're playing a road game? Like, I guess I don't know exactly how all these things work.
Yeah, I don't really either. I mean, incense you can put pretty much anywhere, I think, but I don't. I know about like the smells of the stuff, but I don't know about any of the magic. I'm not that kind of hippie. I'm just like the Black Sabbath and weed gummies hippie. So yeah, I don't know. But I think you're right that if they get waxed by an LAFC team that's played their 800th game in a week, and it's maybe going to be a little scary. How they deal without Christian, I think you're going to know within 15 minutes of that game starting how nervous you should be about the rest of the year, or the next month and a half at least.
Yeah. And by the way, they might be mixing Alex Roldan too, just to throw that little nugget in there. This is from Dan Linane. Who's our leader in the back this season? Do we need an old guy to help stand us up and stay focused whenever we take the lead? Maybe I just missed the one and only Chad.
Yeah, it's hard to replace Chad Marshall. But I don't know. I think this game obviously had some defensive lapses, and we've seen a few this year, but I think this defense has still looked like a elite or right below elite tier MLS defense for most of the year. And Reagan and Yamar both look, I mean, Reagan is the second coming of Chad Marshall, to hear some people tell it. And I don't think they're necessarily that far off. And, I think Yamar is a really good veteran presence, really solid defender. So I don't know. I think this last game was frustrating, had some lapses, but it hasn't been an issue for me this year.
Yeah. And I mean, I think they're probably thinking of the Portland game as well, but I don't see that as a trend. The Sounders have seen out leads plenty of times, or not plenty of times, but they've seen out leads in other games without too much drama. And in fact, I thought they were actually managing the Charlotte game pretty well. They had killed off the first 20 minutes after giving up or after scoring really effectively. Like they weren't giving up chances. I think that was what was the most frustrating thing, is that the goal that they scored was their first decent look after the Sounders had scored. So it kind of came out. The Sounders were set defensively, and I don't know. I don't necessarily blame the cornerbacks or the cornerbacks, the center backs there. But anyway,
yeah, very frustrating. Our last one is from TIE Fighter 17. Obviously, MLS would want to have Miami play in Seattle next year for a 60,000 plus crowd. Do you think Messi would even participate here at 35 on turf?
So this was an interesting debate that I actually got into with Jackson Phelps of KJR, because he made a similar comment. Like, of course, MLS is going to try and engineer a match between Sounders and Miami. I'm not as convinced that MLS is that worried about trying to engineer such a matchup. Miami, and I would think if the Sounders play Miami, it would probably be in Miami. And I don't know that the delta between what the Sounders draw on TV and what any random MLS team would draw on TV against Messi is enough to sort of force this to happen. I will note that the Sounders played Charlotte last year, and then they played them again this year. So it's not above MLS to there's not a set rotation that they go through. But my thinking was that, the Sounders had gone several years between playing various Eastern Conference opponents, and I wouldn't be surprised if they went a few years without playing Miami. I would like to think that Messi would play here. I don't know. It will be interesting to see how much he skips turf games, and it would be neat to see Messi come play here. I'm not personally that invested in that possibility, but yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be totally shot. Zlatan, I don't think ever played here. Thierry Henry never played here, I don't believe. So he wouldn't be the first big star to skip playing in Seattle.
I think that is true. I think Messi is less of a dickhead than Zlatan. At least
probably
outside of paying his taxes, I guess.
Right.
But I do I just get the feeling that he's a little bit more of a gamer than Zlatan is. But I also think if you are getting as much money as Messi is getting, you can play on turf.
Yeah.
And if he decides he's not going to play on turf, that's going to be really annoying to me personally. Turf. I get that players hate playing on turf. You're getting money from Apple to be here. You can play 90 minutes on turf. I don't care how old you are. But I think that you are right. I think Seattle fans love the idea of filling the stadium and having a big crowd and making it a big spectacle. I do not think the league cares at all.
I mean,
especially when I think they care, right? But I think if they're marketing Messi, they care about Messi. They don't.
Right.
Having some extra fans in Seattle is not as big a deal. Now I think having Atlanta in an interconference, potentially rivalry game type situation, having that stadium full, that's a big deal. That's interesting.
New England.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing is, they're going to be able to do this a few times. New England, obviously, they're going to be able to do it with Atlanta. I would imagine they're going to play some games at hard. They got to play some games at hard. It's just hilarious to me that they might play 17 games at Drive Pink Stadium which is a temporary facility. They're supposedly going to add seats to, but it's still going to be 23,000 seats or something like that. So it's Nashville. He's going to be in a lot of cool stadiums. Nashville, Cincinnati. Anyway. St. Louis.
This is part of the reason I don't like guys like Messi coming to the league, is that it is kind of embarrassing that Leo Messi is playing in this Tinker Toy ass stadium. Like, it's not like MLS is not at that level. It's not, and we don't. I don't know. I'm gonna start having an inferiority complex. I'll shut up, but it's just,
yeah, I hear you.
It's annoying. It's annoying.
I hear you.
Anyway.
Well, that's the show. Thank you to our Substack subscribers. Thank you to Full Pull Wines. Thank you to Watson's Counter. Hopefully, next time we record, we'll have some big news we can share. But that's taken a little longer for us to share than we thought. So just put that in your space that you think about. Anyway, I'm Jeremiah O'Shan signing off for Lickett and Aaron Campo. This is No Sadiatis, and we will catch you next time.
We love you. Let's win another one!